This KING-KAMBUF, 100 proof, bringing you nothing but the truth. It's Architecture, Lesson 2, Programming and Planning and Practice, Forms and Prototypes, Introduction. Here we go. All building projects should be organized to fulfill the purpose in efficient, humane, and responsible manner. To accomplish this, a plan the project must develop that set of forth how the work be done. An essential element of this plan is to project and program. The organization of the program has a fundamental effect on the usefulness, efficiency, and comfort of the project. Program development, therefore, must consider various organizational concepts together with the factors that may influence the project, such as natural, sustainable, social, cultural, visual, and functional requirements. A useful approach to programming is to establish the order of importance or hierarchy of the function in space. Central locations are usually appropriate for spaces that use frequent by the majority of occupants. Similarly, peripheral locations are appropriately the spaces used by smaller numbers of occupants or for specific activities. Thus, on the college campus, the library will occupy a central location with classrooms nearby and laboratories and shops located on the periphery. On the restricted site, the elements may be organized vertically. In that case, heavily used areas will be located on the lower floors, while activities which are less people intensive can take place on higher levels. There are essentially two approaches used to determine the suitability of a particular organizational pattern. The first arranges the major activity in relationship to the physical characteristics of the site. A site that is restricted in size, for the example, might suggest a multi-level building where the site borders a river and the view is particularly attractive. A linear arrangement might be appropriate. In the second approach, the pattern is the base on the logical organization of activities, such as organizational patterns may be expressed diagrammatically. However, a diagram should not be regarded as an actual floor plan, but merely a suggested relationship of building functions. In practice, the two approaches are generally combined. That is, the organizational pattern is determined by both the site conditions and the functional requirements designers have available. The fairly conventional palette of forms, prototypes, which can be used in a single story and multiple story configurations. The simple and the rectangle do exist. Rectangles can be arranged as a star from an axial form or quadrilateral form. They can also be linked in a series to create a grid. Circular configurations using rectangles are also possible with angular joints and particular useful forms from the quadrangular with activities they house and each of the four comprising sides and all activities accessible from the central courtyard of space. Each original organizational pattern has intrinsic functional implications such as the degree of flexibility, dispersion, or concentration, degrees of accessibility, and the individuality of the repetitiveness of the parts. Although using familiar geometric shapes to organize spaces in the common practice, it should be done judiciously to assure that the form is appropriate and it satisfies the functional needs. From is the best derived from the thorough study of all the functional needs in relationship to the specific site. Furthermore, indeed, many activities may be organized in one of the several acceptable ways The determination of the appropriate form must be measured against the building function, site costs, and then other important aspects of the projects in the end. One form concepts thoroughly analyzed in relationship to the requirements to be served will be the most satisfactory. Organizational values. Let's see. The physical form of the project has numerous implications in the interest of the creating of a successful design. The following general objectives should be considered and satisfied. Behavioral interests and objectives must be satisfied. One must determine and see if there are ample spaces to be for the people to perform their tasks. Well, let's see. One must be understanding of the people using the facility to determine if the spatial setting facilitates the work that they're gonna be doing. Circulation aspects refers to the ease with which a person's information and goods can be moved within the facility. In certain areas, it may be desirable to allow free movement and frequently impersonal interactions. In other areas, it may be necessary to minimize social interaction for reasons of privacy. Circulation and interpersonal communication may be encouraged by providing common corridors and attractive dining facility. Essential service facilities, in contrast, impenetrable boundaries, crowded corridors, and remote service points, restricted circulation while impeding impersonal contact. Health aspect refers to those factors that cause stress and threatens health, such as noise, crowding, glare, unsafe conditions. Environment from can affect both physical and emotional health. In fact, adaptive aspects. In those adaptive aspects are those adaptive aspects are those adaptive aspects are those that facilitate future change. The organizational functions and operations of the project often changes over time. Therefore, the physical form and arrangements of the buildings must be sufficiently flexible to accommodate future modifications. Adaptability is facilitated by the use of repetitive basic spatial units or modules, separation of services, areas, and areas being served regularly, layout, wall flexibility, and well scaled out and proper proportion, basic building spaces. Cost aspects run the nation. Cost aspects often determine the organizational pattern of the development. Projects cost may be reduced by using regular forms, compact arrangements, and high density, lower designs of construction standards, and obviously another method of reducing costs. However, the initial cost savings may be offset by the higher maintenance of the operating costs over the life of the building. Organizational and the design. Design is the creative act of organizing space and form with the objective of achieving specific programmatic goals. In assessing disability or the various organizational concepts we see, some designers employ adaptive of standards solutions that have proven successful over the years. Particularly relevant are the forms that have become prototypes, including the lineal arrangements, the radial plan, the compact layout, the extended layout, the single or the multi-level floor arrangements. All designers should be aware of these prototypical forms as well as the types of functions of which they are suited. In general, the most productive approach to designs is one of which the essential functions of the project are identified and the designer develop the forms and satisfy these functions in certain situations. The design solution may reflect the unique characteristics of a particular site. Unusual steep terrain or extremely severe weather might be open to the extended design and practical. A mild climate, the flat sites, and other hand are suitable for the extended open layout. Some projects are difficult to organize because there are numerous parts. In these cases, The total project can be divided into smaller components. We see modules of spatial forms of social groups in large housing developments. For example, a group of 10 or 15 units may be provided a conventional, convenient design module. The designer may then solve each part separately, combine the results, and find a solution to the whole embodying of aspects of the project. Organizational factors. The architectural program as the statement of the required function determines the organization of projects. There are several factors. However, the influence the basic spatial organizations, regardless of the function. Among these are the forms itself, site itself, movement patterns, and growth patterns. Site factors such as soil conditions must be evaluated in order to determine the economical and feasibility of the design concept. Adverse subsoil conditions, for example, may require centralized or compact layouts. Certain landforms may also influence the basic organization. For example, extreme topography variations, which limit development of future expansion. The organizational concept may be also influenced by unique site features, natural growth characteristics, the local climate, severe weather conditions, for example, will reduce anticipation outdoors walking distance and require protections for pedestrian movement. Movement patterns refer to the accommodation of internal functional systems as well as the accessibility of the project related to the larger community. Pedestrians and the vehicular access, movement, and often control determines the basic organization of the project. In the airports, for example, they are organized almost exclusively as the results of these factors. The distribution and provisions of services too may provide determine the shape of a project. Nearly also known, all buildings must be served by water, electric, sewer, telephone, gas, internal communication. In the majority of these cases, compact centralized schemes the most economical for these services. The multi-level arrangement generally have economic advantages over the single level extended arrangement. Pedestrian movement is often complex and frequently determines the selection of an organizational form over another. The organization of the theater and the sports arena, for example, is the base to the large extent on the efficiency movement of large groups of people in the situation evolving pedestrian movement. It has been found that people are normally willing to walk about 10 minutes beyond they would find home in some type of mechanical transport. Patterns of future expansion often require that the system of organizations be flexible enough to permit changes. Changes may include modifications to the number of users, organizations of the project, social or technological developments, and change of the structure though, since it is difficult to forecast the exact nature of change to accommodate the organizational patterns should be sufficiently flexible to allow extensions to the original form. Organizational patterns among the conventional systems and organizations are more common patterns to a current use are described here below. Lineal organizational patterns among conventional systems of organizations. The more common patterns are in current use are described below. Organizational patterns. Lineal applies to the pattern consisting of the single spine having one principal direction. Subsystem or fingers can develop along the spine at the right angles to the spine. Further development may be limited by the availability of land and by the distance between the extreme ends of the lineal system is useful where major circulation occurs between 2 points. If lengths are reasonable, it can be economical form, but it often lacks a focus. and it may become congested. Axial is the variation of the lineal pattern in which the basic organizing principle is the central axis spine or the mall around which the structures are arranged. Extensions may be developed along secondary patterns and paths of growth at right angles, and primary axial patterns allow for the incremental development of relative ease and minor disruptions. However, they may become extended. Say radial patterns consist of central cores from which secondary elements radiate in all directions. This pattern is appropriate where the elements have a common origin or destination. Since all paths emanate from the common point, the radial pattern is somewhat inflexible. However, it is compact and allows the maximal of social interactions. And then we have the grid. Grid refers to a cellular type pattern indeed that places the emphasis on flexibility. Since it may be extended in several directions, the grid is simple, convenient, compact, and suited for complex distributions to follow. It can become monotonous, however, unless it is several points of focus, such as public spaces or buildings. Percentual organization consists of the disparate activities which may be and may not have a strong central feature. In this pattern, the composition consists of a balanced component which allows growth to develop in any direction. In the site permits percentual patterns with the flexible, compact, efficient, and often quiet, economical determinants of form. Every project has a number of considerations that determine its physical form. The relative influence as determinants varies depending upon the nature of the project itself. The following discussions identify some of the most important of these. Site structure, relationship. Some sites have strong visual characteristics, such as mountainous areas. Others are weak, such as flat, featureless plains. There should be an inverse relationship between the site and the buildings occupy the visual. Strong sites should have visual, differential, passive structures, while a visual weak site should have visually assertive structures. Site form relationship. All sites possess certain characteristics, forms that are created by generating lines and lines of rolling hills, the horizontal lines of cultivated fields, verticals of clusters, skyscrapers, the angles of distant mountains or roof lines, the housings of the old village. The lines may serve as guidelines in determining architectural forms. Roof slopes can follow the angles of the mountain slopes in the ancient rooftops. A high-rise building, among other high rises, can reinforce the vertical composition. And then we got vegetation. Vegetation, a site with a characteristic vegetation, provides its own clue to an appropriate design form. Northern sites with vertical firs and pines on may suggest a contrasting horizontal emphasis. Southern sites with foliage and trees massing separated by clearings may suggest a similar scale architectural of massing. Climate too can be a powerful form determinant. Extremely cold settings suggest compact buildings with minimum exterior surfaces. Hot, humid climate suggests opening plans, forms allow breezes to penetrate. Rainy climate suggests the sloped roofs, while dry climates imply flat roofs. Sustainable design. Sustainable design encourages the architect to explore forms that respond to it, not only to the temperature, but the wind, the soil conditions, groundwater, native vegetation, and topography. Like much of our indigenous architecture, the result will be the forms that are the less homogeneous and the more responsive to the region and the environment. The structure has a general principle. All buildings should have a visible indication of the structural system economy, and the structural system often produces the most appropriate expressions. Mechanical systems, simply mechanical systems, are generally integrated into the architectural form of the structure. However, there are occasions when they may be visibly expressed. The duct system of the simple shell building of best. The example may be left exposed and treated as a ceiling sculpture. Where the building has a complex mechanical system, it may even play a primary visual role. Materials, the nature of the materials, may also suggest it that the building's bricks are formed. For example, which is the material strong in compression might express compressive force like this, used by arcs. The woods and aluminum sidings might be expressed by a articulation of joints in the occasion openings, which indicated that it is applied surface or exterior skin. Traditional form within. All architectural forms convey meanings that result from the traditional use over a long period of time. In these cases, traditions may be the determinant of the architectural form. A shed roof, for example, expresses efficiency. A peaked roof, domestic habitat. A dome, government. Vertical spire signifies aspirations, and horizontal planes convey a sense of repose. Function. All building forms should express their function and the repetitive activities of the office building. We see the example can be expressed by the repetitive pattern of the facade. The linear production process suggests that a linear massing and the need for the interior flexibility may suggest several similar modules. Cultural association. The use of the past in the architectural can be used to express the forms of new buildings. This may solve an emotional need, but quite possibly ignore the function of the other architectural requirements of the project. The expression of the cultural or historical association, therefore, may be a design determinant, but it takes a great skill to unite the past and the present successfully. Then we talk about scale, the need to establish a human scale, particularly in large structures we see, may suggest a series of smaller constituent forms proportioned. They need to be homogeneous, harmonized, and proportions may be determined mind overall. Forms of modifying, massing, and profiling. All building masses are perceived as complete forms and profiles. The consideration may modify overall forms of hierarchy or architectural forms may be influenced by the establishing a hierarchy among the building components, and the building does not necessarily mean that the focus will be on the last single element, but rather than all of the components will be positioned and treated in a subordinate way. The assembly, the room, the government, all buildings or the library on the college campus, while relatively small in size, may still be the hierarchical focal point of the project throughout the position and the treatment. This is KING-KAMBUF, 100 proof, bringing you nothing but the truth. This is architecture. We building foundations. That was lesson number 2. Lesson number 3. We'll see you next time. Programming and space needs. This is KING-KAMBUF, 100 proof. Always bringing you the truth. Amen. Kambu.